It's time for another Elsie's Little Pickles. It's the Pickle Pod for the people. It's pickle power for the people. I'm going to use my lips together with my tongue and actually make words that make sense. With that being said, we just came off of the debate, which was, by all standings, amazing for Kamala Harris, though you are hearing pushback from the Trump people. I am actually in this wonderful situation where I have not only my brother and Brian Kiefer, I also have Colton, and we're going to go over and dissect what this debate was. Now, with all that being said,
it's a family pickle.
It's a family pickling.
Hello. They're eating the dogs.
They're eating the dogs. We'll get to that. But you got to admit, that was one of the best. That was one of the best. You know how back when Reagan said, I'm not going to let my opponent's youth and inexperience be a part of this debate or whatever? That was a classic line, but it was a classic line that landed for Reagan. I think that they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets. That's going to be the
who canceled
the death line for Trump.
Celebrity has canceled his Springfield, Ohio visit. His concert, Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg won't go to Springfield.
Yeah.
And I would say Katy Perry. The level of desperation, the level of unpreparedness in this was beyond what I ever thought I would see out of Trump. And I've seen Trump, not prepared, but able to kind of recover.
I saw it on TV.
Yeah, I have a concepts of a plan.
Really inspiring plan. Hope and confidence in the voting
exactly.
base.
All right, so this was an hour and a half debate. We're not going to hit every question. We're not going to hit every response, but what we are going to hit are some of the highlights. So with that being said, let's start off with his Project 2025. Kamala came out of the gate, hit him with that, and this was his rebuttal to it.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
No.
So
oh.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do.
Okay. Let's try to unwrap that. Let's try to figure out what the fuck he was saying.
All right. First of all, he mentioned Project 2025, right?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately for him, survey says he lied. 140 people that were in his administration are working for Heritage Foundation. They're the ones.
You're just going to say that.
Yeah. They're the ones who came up with the Project 2025. Former Heritage Foundation, former employees who now work for him, there are 67, at least.
So I don't know anything about it. I've heard things, but I don't know anything about it. Okay.
And that's not even to mention the fact that his Agenda 47 is just Project 2025, but Trump. It's because Project 2025 as a political manifesto, if we can call it that, was designed that any Republican could be elected as president and they could still make this happen.
Exactly.
Trump didn't like that because it didn't say Trump on it.
Exactly, which is why he branded it.
I was about to say, he's all about the brand.
He's all about the brand. So it's Agenda 47.
Yeah.
And
it's got to have the golden Trump letters on it.
Yeah. And if you draw, literally, you could take, sadly, what he did, I've read and watched all of the Agenda 47 info. And you can literally draw a line from Project 2025 to these different Agenda 47 propositions that he's putting forward. So this is just bullshit that he's trying to smoke and mirrors in front of the fucking American people. Now, unfortunately, about 30%, which is about his base, will fall for this because they don't understand that Agenda 47 is literally copy and paste and put a Trump logo on Project 2025.
Put it this way. If I were to do this for one of my class assignments, I would get a 0 and I would probably get disciplinary action for plagiarism.
Exactly. And I think that she came back pretty good at him in that. I think that she defined what really is his plan, which is the same plan as it was the last time with some of this Project 2025 added in. Project 2025 takes away the necessity to think through an actual law or proposition or how to move forward. Project 2025 is literally meant to be a playbook. It's meant to be almost a employee handbook on how to do things.
You do X, then Y, then Z.
Exactly. So what she effectively did there was say, not only are you part of, are you adopting this Project 2025, and not only is that where you're going with your, if you get into office again, but on top of that, don't try to think that we're fooled by your Agenda 47, and don't think that we don't know that the whole point is to lower taxes for the upper 1% to 2%. I think that that was pretty much as close to a slam dunk early on in this debate as she could have gotten. She was really on point. She was confident. He clearly, even that early on, and this is before she started his crowd size comments, he was already shaken that early on. And to be shaken that early on, this was what?
20 minutes in, if that?
No, this was actually about 14 minutes in. And he was already showing signs of being shaken.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really appreciated. Kamala baited him so many times, and he fell for it every single time.
Yeah, he fell for it every single time. One last thing that should be said about that. is he's like, it's like 4 sentences. Run, spot, run.
That's
I don't know. I'm not really good at English. Colton, you were really spectacular. Is that 4 or is that 3 sentences? Run, period, run, spot.
You know,
I mean, we can break it down, I guess, to 4.
Unclear on both a logical and political frame. But what I will point out is there is a speck of truth in what Trump said there. So Kamala recently released her agenda on her website, right? And when she did that, she forgot to change what was on there from what was on Biden's agenda, because it was literally just copy and paste. So I will give him at least partial points for that.
All right, we'll give a point for that.
Down to at one point it literally said elect Joe Biden 2020.
Oh,
on
like,
Kamala's website.
Like somebody did not pay attention when they were making it. All right.
Yeah, and that was up for like a couple hours until they noticed it. They fixed it. But, partial points to Trump on that one.
All right, fair enough.
I will point out though that Kamala's plans are not that far removed from Biden's plans. She wants to build on what Biden was able to accomplish.
I don't think, though, that people really fully appreciate what Biden has done. I mean, like, you could take literally everything except the infrastructure plan out of the last 3 years, and just the infrastructure plan alone was a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely has done some good things. I think that he has not been able to do as much as he wanted or as much as anyone wanted. And because of that, he's getting a bad rap. And the reason he's not able to get that much done is because he has a Senate that's split exactly in half except for Kamala. And he has a now Republican House.
Yeah, there's definitively some political obstacles in his way to be able to do what he wants to get done. All right.
And not to mention the Supreme Court, but that's for another day.
Right. Oh, we're going to do a Supreme Court. We're going to absolutely do it. Right. Yeah, we're going to dig into the Supreme Court at some point. And we're also going to, in another episode, literally break down the argument, because I think a lot of people have a problem defending their point against Trump. So one of the episodes we're planning right now is going to be the argument against Trump that has nothing to do with his politics. So we'll get into that, but back to this. Next question, Mr. Moderator.
Both brought up. The vice president brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
All right, I got to stop it right there, because what he just said was an absolute flat out lie as far as where inflation was and interest rates and the like. You have to go back to, and me and Keith can speak to this better than most, because we remember it. The late 70s, early 80s, the gas issues, the energy issues of that time were spiking prices everywhere. At one point, I believe the top level that it got to was an 18% for a mortgage. Mm-hmm. and that was during Reagan's first term. So 18% mortgage. All right, I want people to think about what that means when you're talking about a fucking mortgage. When you're
Which China has nothing to do with.
China has nothing to do with. But what he is essentially stating is that he's going to rob Peter to pay Paul. All right, so how does that play out? It plays out in this sense. Inflation is the invisible tax. We've all known about it forever. It's the invisible tax. You want to keep it right around 2%. For whatever reason, 2% seems to be a healthy point where you do need a little bit of inflation, but you don't want a lot. It's typically thought of as something that's good for the economy in that small dose. It's kind of like almost a vaccine, if you will. You get a little bit of pain, you know that you're protected from a lot of pain. However,
well, it just stops the dollar from stagnating. That's really the
exactly. And so, like I said, a little bit of pain for a lot of health in the long run. So you do need a little bit of inflation, but it is an the invisible tax on all of us. I am absolutely against inflation because where I see it right now is this is not necessarily inflation under normal circumstances. This is the hangover from the pandemic. So the hangover from the pandemic, what I mean by that is a lot of businesses, a lot of companies realized they could charge full price. They didn't have to put out coupons. They didn't have to have rebates. They didn't have to have incentives for people to buy their product. And they were getting full retail. Now, I saw that in the automotive market. I saw that in the power sports market. I saw that in many, many markets, including appliances. I saw that, as far as like washers, dryers, right on down the line to hot water heaters, okay? When you think you can continue to hold the price where you want to, it makes you a little bit greedy and it makes you go, well, if I can get full retail, why can't I get full retail plus 3%, plus 5%? And the reason I say 3 and 5% is that's what most investors and most companies are shooting for year after year, which is a 3 to 5% increase in profitability year after year. How do you keep that up forever? You don't. You can't. I'm sorry. At some point, a fucking screwdriver is only worth what a fucking screwdriver is worth. At some point, a hot water heater is only worth what a hot water heater is worth. A motorcycle, a car, a truck, an SUV. There are limits to what we can charge people for this. And we're seeing this, mind you, granted, it's been 50, 60 years since our mother and father, your grandfather and grandmother bought their house. Mm-hmm. But I personally, in 2022, spent more money on my pickup truck than my mom and dad paid for their double lot, 4-bedroom colonial with a basement and a custom brick wall around it as far as fencing. That's ridiculous. They paid $66,000 for their house in 1967. And in 2022, I paid $73,000, almost $74,000 for a fucking pickup truck. They had 30 years to pay that off. I had 5. That's the difference.
What you're kind of getting at is, as far as like what people like to call Bidenflation, it's corporate greed. Like it's not necessarily, it's not inflation in the traditional sense. It is corporate greed. There is no reason.
The Kroger CEO was in court and he admitted that Kroger jacked up the prices on essentials.
Because they could.
Yeah.
Because
they could.
Exactly. And this was the opportunity for all of those companies and all of those corporations that didn't maybe make in the previous 5 years, they didn't maybe make every 3 to 5% that was expected from them based on what Wall Street says and what their investors say. And I get,
got to make line go up.
Well, look, not only do you have inflation, you have shrinkflation, which is, for those who don't know, it used to be, let's say, for example, a 12-ounce bag of Doritos, and now it's a 10-ounce bag, okay? So, and I'm not picking on Doritos. I'm just saying in general,
and it's
chips
the same
or
price
whatever.
or more.
Yeah, and it's the same price or more. So that's shrinkflation.
Yeah, Gatorade was 32 ounces. It's now 28.
Yeah, so these are just little tiny things that you don't really, you go, okay, well, 28 to 32, it's only 4 ounces different, same price. Okay, I'm not going to get really uptight about that. But multiply that out by however many millions of bottles of Gatorade that now can be produced with those 4 extra ounces from all those other millions of bottles of Gatorade. And suddenly you just found yourself 6, 7, 8% profit for that year. And on top of it, let's say you had left the price the same, but you're selling more. That's great. But what if you didn't leave the price the same? What if you increased it, I don't know, 10 cents? This is what we're talking about. This is corporate greed at its finest. And when you sit there as Trump is sitting there and say it's going to be tariffs, okay, well, that just opens the door for these corporations to go, well, it's just tariffs. So they get to pass the buck onto somebody else while they're not only decreasing the amount that you're getting, increasing the price you're paying for it. And then on top of it, they're going to say, well, we've got these tariffs to deal with, so we have no choice. Sorry, we have to pass it on to the consumer, which is another probably 20%. What?
And not to mention, our commodities, things that we buy, overwhelmingly are made in China. So putting, what did he say, a 200% tariff on Chinese goods?
I think it was 20%.
20? Okay. Well, either way, even if it's just half, but it realistically is more like 60, 70, 80% of goods that we come in contact with on a day-to-day basis, even if it's only half, that is at least 20% more expensive for things that people are buying every single day, whether it's a t-shirt, whether it's
it doesn't matter
rice,
what it is.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Washing machine.
That's the thing. All right.
And you know what? Thank you, Arizona Iced Tea, for not bumping that price up above 99 cents. They went on record saying that they were not going to inflate the prices, and they kept their promise.
No, they exactly. But now, unfortunately, the can is the size of a thimble.
Issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said, the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, Every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response.
I thought that was brilliant. Because it had to be said.
NBC should lose their license for that.
Yeah. He actually put a complaint into the FCC and wanted them to lose their license. And the head of the FCC said, yeah, no, we're not doing that. It needs to be said. Apparently it shouldn't need to be said, but it does apparently. If a baby is born and it is outside the womb and you kill it, that's murder. Okay.
Yeah, and I think what's important here is, real quick, just talking about the letter of the law of Roe v. Wade, which Trump seems to think is a person named Roe, middle initial V, Wade. So the letter of the law is that abortion is totally permissible in the first trimester. It is somewhat restricted in the second trimester. And then anything beyond that is only in cases of saving the life of the mother.
Which all seems
Roe v.
reasonable.
Wade is the centrist position. And on top of that, the reason why Ohio, of all places, and Kansas, of all places, voted to maintain abortion access is because it is overwhelmingly popular with the American people. When you poll them, anywhere between 55 and 70% of the American populace wants to maintain abortion access.
Well, see, doesn't this get to the point, though, that it doesn't matter what the American people want anymore? It really doesn't. Because
Never has.
It never has. And this has been my argument. And this is why I said I want to do a future episode on, what it actually means to have this conversation and what elections really mean. Because in many ways, even though clearly all 3 of us are pro Kamala, in contrast to Trump, there could be a Republican that we would all agree would be better than, let's say, a Biden, right? But it's just not Trump. So when you think about it in these terms, what is it? 80 or 90% of Americans want some sort of gun control. 80+% of the United States citizens want marijuana to be legalized on a federal level, along with hallucinogenics like magic mushrooms. That to a lesser percentage, but still a very high percentage.
Growing in popularity,
it's very
because
much
of the medicinal value.
Exactly. So, you can have plus 50% on any given issue and even get close to 90%. And that's still not getting done in the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the White House. That's what bothers me, is when we know that upwards of 70-80% of the voting public wants something done. We still can't get that done, and we can't get that done because it's politically expedient to have that as a wedge issue. So that's my problem is they know what the wedge issues are.
That's where they get their votes.
That's
and
where
then
they
don't do that.
Right.
Because then they lose the votes.
Exactly. So
because then they might actually have to have real policies.
Well, if you no longer have...
Don't forget also the lobbyists.
Well, hold on. It goes even beyond that, though. I mean, let's break it down to the simplest terms on this. Simplest terms, if we as a government body, Congress, work together on a bipartisan bill with the people who are most revered for how strict they are on the border and how draconian their views are, but we still give that person 80 to 90% of what they're asking for. And as the other side, we're only getting 20, maybe 10 to 20% of what we want. And we can solve this problem the way that the opposition wants, not the party in power. And then here comes Donnie and says, I'm running on immigration. Don't you fucking dare sign, pass that bill and let Biden sign it. This is just proof that it's absolute kabuki theater and it's bullshit.
And that's something that I really, really don't appreciate about the Democrats, is that they think if they go right, we should follow them. That's the brain rot that Democrats tend to have, is like, oh, they want strong immigration laws. Okay, well, what if we
give them 80, 90%? No, what if we just on immigration laws?
They're already not going to vote for you.
Exactly.
Have a real policy.
Exactly.
Have a real policy. We're going to build a wall. Have a real fucking policy.
Exactly. But this is my point. This is my point is that what we're seeing at this current point in politics is that it has nothing to do with the will of the people. And I feel like that's changing with Kamala. While I may not agree with everything or every position that she has or has
She's setting the stage for a bigger change. She
is definitely setting the stage for a bigger change, and it should be one that people look forward to, not are fearful of. And the reason I say that is whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, if the stage has been set for actual policy to be put forward rather than political kabuki theater, it benefits all of us at some point. I don't have to agree with a law that hard right viewpoint gets through and gets signed into law. I don't have to agree with it. I have to respect it. But I will only respect it if it's something that has gone through the process, has been put through the ringer, and finally comes up and is like, okay, yeah, I guess this makes sense. And it's almost, even if somewhat regrettably, signed into law as a bipartisan issue. I don't need perfect. I need progress. And what I think happened with abortion, and we'll get to Kamala's response on that, but I think what happened with abortion is the dog caught the car, and Donald was the one who let that dog off the leash. And in doing so, he has no choice but to take credit for it, to garner.
And that's why he's squirming. Whenever it comes up, he's really squirrely about it.
Well, he's squirrely about it because he knows that he needs it for his base and for the Christian nationalists and the evangelicals. But he also knows that there are far less of them than there are of women who are really pissed off about that.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. Now, let's hear Kamala's response if we can.
It's to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, When Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President.
Couldn't have put it better myself. Could not have put that better myself. How about this? Yeah. The government doesn't have the right to tell me what to do with my own fucking body. Man, woman, whatever. You do not have the right. End of story. I don't understand. Look, I get there's a lot of people out there whose their religious beliefs are completely anti-abortion. I get that there are a lot of people out there who see it as nothing more than the murdering of an unborn child. And you are welcome. Don't do that. Yeah, then don't do that. You are welcome. You are welcome to your opinion. What you are not welcome to do is to tell me what to do with my body, to tell any woman what to do with her body. Because, I mean, let's face it. If it was reversed and they were saying we are requiring all men over the age of 35 to get a vasectomy, it would be a different fucking story, wouldn't it? I don't think that would fly.
Yeah. How about
you're right
call?
To swing your fist ends at the beginning of my nose.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. The whole thing, the idea that the government should have any right to talk about anything when it comes to your own personal decisions regarding your body is absolutely fucking ridiculous.
How about a national call for spaying and neutering your children?
Yeah. Well, that actually did. I mean, that actually was out there for a bit. And even I said, all right, here's the deal. In order to try to make it fair, how about we do this? As soon as you're 18, you have a $5,150, $5,150 is what I called it, because that's the average amount spent per year per male per child on childcare, right? So that's the average. So child support,
Christian soldiers,
child support
to get neutered.
Child support costs on average every male who has to pay child support $5,150, $5,150. So if you did that from the moment you're 18, boom, you've got a $5,150 on you until you either prove that you have had a vasectomy or that you are incapable of getting a woman pregnant because of you don't have the sperm count, whatever the case may be. Unless you can prove that you are unable to get a woman pregnant, you have a $5,150 on you up until the age of 65 or retirement, which is kind of moving. I think it's 67 now. So with that, I just think that it's ridiculous that somebody like Trump could even think that he has anything to say on the whole thing.
It's God's plan that she got pregnant. Well, you know what? It's also God's plan that he can't get an erection.
There you go.
Toss off Viagra.
Exactly. Okay, so the other thing that was interesting was the immigration issue. So let's hear a little piece of that.
A turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to.
I got to pause it right there because a couple things. One, she's absolutely right. He killed the bill so he could run on that. Even Republicans have said this. All right. So this isn't like a pile-on by Democrats trying to push a false narrative. This is something that came out of the Republican camp. So he definitively did not want Biden to have the win on the immigration policy. And this is my point. Like we were talking about just a few minutes ago, the idea of divisional political views on real issues, right? I don't know a Democrat who doesn't say we need to make sure that the border is secure. I don't know an American that doesn't say that we don't need to make the border secure.
Yes, you do. I'm one.
Well, yeah, but
I will explain. I will be explaining why,
and that's
continue.
fine. But let's keep this focused. I think that's a conversation for a different day. This is a focus on the actual debate between the two of them, in the sense of we all can understand the idea of sovereignty, whether we agree with that or we don't. We can understand that and we can support that. But when there is an issue that both sides come to an agreement on, create a bill on, and then it gets killed even by the people who created the bill, okay? When you got the people who were involved in writing the bill voting against the bill, that should tell you all you need to know about whether or not they're serious about their view. Whether you agree with it or not, they're not even serious about what they're talking about. The only thing I want to say on that real quick is, one, they really make a big deal about fentanyl. That overwhelmingly comes through standard shipping ports from China. Right.
Yes.
Not up through the Mexican border.
Correct.
And second, generally speaking, in a statistical sense, immigrants do far less crime than do native-born Americans,
because they're afraid.
And the reason for that,
they're afraid to get deported.
Exactly.
And
So to me, this issue is just fear mongering. It's bullshit. It's just a point of division for whether you're on the left or the right, Democrat or Republican. It is just a point of division to distract us from what is actually important.
Now to pivot,
that's all I'll say on that.
Now to pivot from that, unless you've got something you want to add.
I just want to add in that when it comes to tax money that is paid by illegal immigrants through jobs, through whatever, do you know how much they pay yearly?
Oh, it's way more than we do, because they don't get any of the benefits back.
They don't get any benefits back. But in 2022, for an example, because that's the latest number, they paid $96.7 billion in taxes.
Yeah.
Billion.
So now to pivot to the latter part, I thought it was a brilliant strategy from Kamala and her team to invite people to go to a Trump rally. And then because I mean, we've all seen it. If you're paying any attention to any of the Trump rallies, like
so many people,
but like I actually watch them.
We have the greatest rallies. the first of multiple like bait and switches that Kamala pulled on Trump, and he fell for it every single time.
Hook, line, and
This
sinker.
was the moment. This was the moment for me where he started hunching, flop sweating. His neck pussy started jiggling.
That is one pussy that needs to be aborted.
So yes, you're absolutely right. But it was also the point where it became very, very clear after the debate was over. That was the definitive point where she had put him on the defensive beyond what he was normally defensive about. Like, she really rattled him with this. This really bothered him. This almost...
You saw it on his face.
You saw it on his face.
She said it.
It was almost like saying...
All you have to do is hit him in the ego.
Yeah, it was almost like saying, I saw his dick right before the show, and boy, is it tiny. And that's how he reacted to it, right? So now let's...
Peckerwood.
Yeah, so Peckerwood. So let's hear how he rebounded.
Like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in.
Dogs.
They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
Like chicken.
And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond.
Yeah. Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or bad jobs.
Choices.
I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed viciously and violently
because of the
killed.
Deal
and
you
I got
made.
to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any sitting president in history by far.
Okay, those are the only true things that he said.
But it still doesn't matter.
It still doesn't matter because he still got less votes than Biden. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
Is like this kind of rambling and fear-mongering, I think the country is just exhausted with. When you get to the point where you're screaming, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets, that should at some point show most of the country, at least the country or the part of the country that is not wearing a red hat. This guy is off his fucking rocker.
It would genuinely have been less embarrassing if he all of a sudden just like started having spaghetti fall out of his pockets.
Yes, exactly.
Like we find out that he keeps spaghetti in his pockets by way of it falling out of his pockets.
Coke.
Donald, is that spaghetti in your pockets? No, it's not spaghetti in my pockets. Why would he keep spaghetti in my pockets?
It's not spaghetti. It's my Sudafed noodles.
It's my Adderall sauce and
Adderall sausage.
Oh shit! But this is what we're talking about: is that
Diet Coke plus, plus Adderall.
Like there comes a point where you
no
have
caffeine, just meth.
Yeah, exactly. There comes a point where it's not. It would be absolutely. So I think we've gone through all the stages of grief almost.
President, the math just doesn't add up. Did you say math?
Did you say meth? It's one of those things where it was like he got elected. It was terrifying. He was in office. It was horrific. He was voted out. It got even worse. And now he's trying to get back in, and it's actually becoming a bit comical. He's becoming a caricature of himself.
Again, 81 million people fired him.
That was the best line she had. Let's see if we can get to that. All right, so now let's talk about peaceful transfer of power.
In just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, What about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, sir.
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
See, that right there, I think, is a big difference. All right?
Keep in mind, the National Guard is basically controlled by governors. However, the D.C. National Guard is solely under federal control.
So he could have,
yes,
of his own accord.
Yes.
Without checking with Nancy Pelosi.
Correct.
Without checking with the mayor.
Correct.
Without checking with his valet.
Correct.
Without checking with his chauffeur.
Even the chauffeur.
Even the chauffeur.
Even his baker.
The butcher?
And
even the guy that gets him his Diet Coke.
What about the candlestick maker?
Possibly.
That also is ignoring the fact that during January 6th, he fully intended on not returning to the White House and, in fact, leading them into the Capitol.
Yes.
As supported by the fact that all of his handlers in the Secret Service reported him wrestling over the steering wheel from his driver.
Now, I don't know if that's true or it's not, but I'm going to assume that it is because it seems very Trump-like, okay? I guess my point is that we are, first off, ever since she questioned people leaving his rally, he has gotten progressively louder.
Yes.
He is shouting. He is not.
I also love Kamala's tactical laughs.
Yes. Yes.
We've heard a couple of them so far, but it's very tactical.
I don't think people give her enough credit for that. I don't think people realize that she's using that as a tool to throw him off. And this is it. Whether you like Kamala or you don't like Kamala, she is the first politician that has fucked his day up. Now, I
want to also add that he was truthful. He did say, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Now, I have questions about what patriotically means. However, he did also say, we fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. What does that tell you?
It tells me everything. It goes back to the dog whistles. So the dog whistles in specifically the Republican Party go back to when Nixon was around and in office. They figured out...
Yeah, Lee Atwater.
Lee Atwater, exactly. Thank you. I was drawing a blank on his name, and boom, there you were, covering my back. We are...
Yeah, and that's the speech that Lee Atwater gave, where he's basically saying you can't say the N-word anymore. You have to talk about abstract things like forced busing or this or that, or integrated schools.
Right. And it became very much a circumstance of finding alternative language. And in that sense, then we ended up eventually with Frank Luntz, the very, very pro-Republican pollster and language guru for the Republican Party. Even he, after this debate, said, I'm calling it for Kamala. I think Trump has lost. And I think that where we're at, now mind you, we're only 53 minutes into the debate, but I'm going to put a pin in it there. And the reason I'm going to do that is because this debate was over right there, in my opinion. Everything that came after that was almost irrelevant. And we can do a part 2 if you guys want to, but I don't know that it's even necessary because, quite frankly, what we saw was Kamala was able to rattle Trump's cage, and in doing so, Trump lost his shit. So with that...
I mean, she just stepped on him at this. Really, once she attacked the crowds, it was just downhill so sharply from there.
Exactly.
This president.
Yeah.
I loved that.
I loved when she almost called him a motherfucker.
Yeah.
And actually there was a clip, from a while back where they were asking her favorite curse word, and she said, "Oh, I can't say that."
Yeah.
And they go, "Well, can you give us a hint?" And she's like, "Well, it begins with an M and it ends with a K." And with that, I think we can put a pin in it. That's been another Elsie's Little Pickles.